Welcome to Let's Therapy, where we get real and raw about your mental health, faith, and blended family. We're your hosts, counselors Scott and Vanessa Martindale. Now let's therapy. Hey guys, welcome back to an episode of Let's Therapy. We are your hosts, Scott and Vanessa Martindale. We are excited to be with you. Just a quick disclaimer, if you are listening to this is not a substitute for counseling. If you are needing help, we strongly suggest you find yourself a great biblical counselor, establish a relationship with them. That would be wonderful for you. If you are having something immediate, please dial 911 or 988 to reach your national suicide hotline. Guys, if you've been with us for a couple of weeks, we have been talking about co-parenting versus parallel parenting and really the mental health benefits and distractions to both, not only from a child's perspective, but also from your marriage perspective. And so we've dove into both of those. We've discovered the differences. We've talked about the benefits. Today, we're going to talk about something unique, which is very apparent in blended families. It's happened in our own blended family, is how do you navigate when you have to jump between the two? Mm-hmm. Because there are seasons of blended families where it's different. Mm-hmm. Now, for example, we are, our stepson is 17. Yeah. And so we are, in a lot of ways, some people would say we're nearing the end. Yeah. I don't think that's the case because we've got a lot of parenting left and that's never going to change. But we are entering into a different season where, you're almost parenting an adult. Yeah. So the parallel parenting does exist very strongly for us because I think everybody's kind of settled into their groove and we do things our way. They may do things a different way. And because he's older, he's able to navigate that a lot better. Yeah. And it's a lot easier on his own mental health because of his increased ability for emotional intelligence, his increased ability to be responsible, and all those things. So we're going to just talk about how to navigate when you're bouncing between the two.
Yeah. So I think parenting plans, we want to tailor those to the needs and the ages of your children because typically two parents in their parenting styles, they're not going to be exactly the same, right? So having that open line of communication, I think is imperative. And we know that everyone's situation is different. So we may not be able to communicate effectively with our ex-spouse, but we can try, right? Yeah. We can at least put it out there. And so, one of the things that we've experienced, like you said, Scott, is we may be in a season of great co-parenting, and then all of a sudden you see a shift and you and your ex are not getting along, or there was an instance or something that happened that set them off, and now you're in arguments and conflict with one another. And so the parenting may not be on the same page. So then all of a sudden you find yourself in a parallel parenting situation, not necessarily by choice sometimes, but and sometimes it is by choice. And so let's talk about how we can, one, maybe prevent that from happening so often, or, when we realize that we are shifting in that, what steps that we can take.
So I will say this too, and I think this is something that every blended family falls victim to, is we base our parenting on what's going on with the child. Mm-hmm. So if the child is struggling, then our parenting is wrong. Yeah. And it's a very knee-jerk reaction to either saying, oh, over there, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. And then all of a sudden the finger pointings happen just because, little Johnny's failing algebra. Yeah. And so the health of the child is not the dictator of how you parent. So you need to be in community and communication about how to parent, regardless of, the ebbs and flows of the success or troubles of children, because they're children. They're gonna come to highs and lows. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned it earlier. You said parental planning, right? Is that what you said?
Or coming up with like a parenting agreement, so to speak.
So that's not just today, that's going forward. It's understanding the adjustments. And we're talking about those really heat moments when you have children that are like maybe younger, 3, 4, 5. Now you're planning to go to school. What is that going to look like? How's that going to affect your co-parenting? As the child gets a little bit older, then you're looking at, okay, well, we've got, more emotions coming out. Maybe puberty is hitting. So those things are changing. Mm-hmm. And then as they get older, driving, dating, these are all things that you can advance plan so that when things do happen, all of a sudden it doesn't become a finger pointing. No, I didn't want to do that. You wanted to do that. Yeah. And all of a sudden you're not co-parenting anymore. Mm-hmm. You've basically picked your sides. Yeah. And now you're just parallel.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I think, one of the best ways to help your children adjust to restructuring, going from one family to the other is creating that plan or that parenting agreement that you were talking about, Scott. And it's just saying, hey, at our house, we're going to do this. Like, what are you implementing over there? I know there was a season when it was chores with Michael, and his stepmom and I were working back and forth to try to establish a game plan for him, so to speak, because we were experiencing the same things at both houses. He was leaving his clothes everywhere, food in the bedroom, all of those things. And so she had asked if we could send over his list of chores and the things we were having him do. And so I took a picture and sent it to her. And that's just one aspect of it. But we were trying to get on the same page so that he could learn responsibility, learn self-care, and be held accountable for that.
Yeah, I'm with you. The accountability of chores is a good thing. I think a lot of it's just, hey, we need to make sure that, I mean, I hate to say this the really plain way or like the kindergarten version of this, but, you can just go to your ex-spouse and say, hey, listen, I just want to make sure that we have a good parenting relationship.
Yeah.
I want to co-parent correctly. You may not like me. You may not like the things that I've done. I may not like you, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But can we both agree that we want the best for our children? And can we both agree that we may want different things for our children, but can we also agree to just communicate and to support each other?
Yeah.
You can support and respect each other as parents, and that goes a long way to establishing a great co-parenting relationship, which, by the way, all of this, because it's a therapy podcast, is going to affect your mental health. It's going to affect your current marriage. It's going to affect your levels of anxiety. You don't have to feel anxious when you see their name pop up on your phone.
Yeah.
That's an instant trigger of anxiety when you don't have a good co-parenting relationship. You don't have to feel anxiety when your child comes back to your house and you have to ask them about their time with their other parent. You can celebrate that because you have a good co-parenting relationship, and that will make it tremendously better, not only in your own mental health, your child's mental health, but also in your marriage.
No, I think that's so good. And yeah, and if someone were to ask us, would you recommend co-parenting over versus parallel parenting? We always, try to go back to scripture, and scripture reminds us that a house divided will fall. It cannot stand. And so, I think when both, just because there's been divorce and there's been things of the past, again, going back to, can I put my pride aside? Can I put what has happened in the past, forgive, and try to co-parent to the best of my ability? We always see the benefits of that. I will tell you, as mental health professionals, when you have two homes that are acting in two completely opposite ways, you will have a more confused kid. You will have a more anxious kid. It can be very difficult. And we have seen, and that's not all across the spectrum, you guys, because again, everyone's situation is different. We have seen where there has been a toxic home and a very healthy home, and that kid is thriving in that. But typically, if we're looking at it,
from a global perspective, when you see parents that can co-parent well together, the children do a lot better versus the other. Yeah. And guys, if you're listening to this podcast, I make some assumptions, because if you've tuned into a therapy blended family podcast, I'm assuming you want to do it right. I'm assuming you want it to be better than it is right now. And these are things that are possible. So don't lose hope if you're in that situation where you're like, this season has been brutal. School's not going well for our children. Their relationships are not well. I'm not co-parenting correctly. I have a lot of animosity. I have a lot of anger and fear, and so forth and so on. Every pain that you can imagine.
Yeah.
Or maybe I've just come out of a litigation season where we had complete disunity, and the idea of co-parenting just makes me want to, what is that expression when you want to throw up? Like toss my apples, something like that.
Cookies.
Toss my cookies. That's what you're doing. Yeah.
Well, and I will say this, when you're coming out of divorce or you're coming out of a litigation season, you're having to redo your custody papers, things like that. When you can establish an agreement at that time, I think that can always be best as well. So if it's a divorce and it's amicable enough where you can agree, or you're even talking to your lawyer or mediator about, hey, the parenting plan is going to be this going forward. And if X, Y, and Z is not possible, then we will go to a parallel parenting method. And that way it's actually documented. It's in your papers. It's in the parenting plan, so to speak, because they can provide that within your papers. That's always a good route to start off with, because say that you've come from an abusive marriage that ended in divorce, and that it's a safety situation, and emotionally, you're still trying to recover from that, then the parallel parenting situation is probably going to be what is best. And having that in the parenting plan documented and in your papers can be very beneficial, so that doesn't actually turn against you when maybe the other parent is saying, well, they won't do X, Y, or Z, or they won't do what I want to do. It's not something that can come back to bite you, so to speak.
Yeah. Use the papers as guardrails.
Yeah.
They're there to keep you on the road. They're there to keep things, hopefully civil, and hopefully give you a baseline for how, things are going to work.
Yes.
So, guys, we know that these two topics are very sensitive because they affect your children.
Yes.
And that's the reason you've listened to this podcast. That's the reason you've tuned in. Hopefully you've sent it to your ex-spouse. Just send them a text, copy this, send it to them. Say, hey, listen, I'd like to do this better. Be the first person to take the step. That's usually the first step in healing a relationship and moving on to a better co-parenting situation. So take those steps. Guys, we hope you've enjoyed this series. We're going to be back next week on something completely different and new, and we cannot wait to see you there.
Yes, be blessed in all that you do.